Buenos dias, mi amigos. I switched from French to Spanish for a very specific reason. Welcome to Coffee with Steven. So, this week's blog is entitled Josephina, and this is one interesting one for me. Um, as most of you probably know, outside of being an attorney, I like to consider myself to be somewhat of an amateur academic. Okay, specifically as it relates to social sciences and political philosophy as well as international politics. Um, Sadly, since I'm not actually paid for this, I don't have the resources to engage in original research like most academics are supposed to do. I'm kind of stuck using other people's research and I do a lot of reading. All right. But a unique situation presented itself a few weeks ago in one of my CCW classes. I had a woman who is now a member here at Artemis named Josephina. Josephina is really fascinating. She, a little bit older than I am, but she grew up in both a communist as well as a fascist regime. She grew up in Cuba as well as in Franco's Spain. This was just an unbelievable opportunity for me to be able to interview somebody that had lived essentially under three different political philosophies: communism, fascism, and ultimately, at least to the extent that it still exists, a constitutional republic. Um, so I asked her, would you mind sitting down and having an interview with me so that I can kind of distill out some of your feelings about these different regimes? Now, let me pause by saying Josephina is spectacularly patriotic. I mean, she has embraced America and American idealism far more so than I think most native born Americans. She understands what life is like outside of this constitutional republic, and she's deeply, deeply concerned with the direction that this country is currently going. And so I asked her, would you sit down for an interview with me? And she was reluctant. And one of the reasons she was reluctant wasn't because of her own personal safety. She's concerned about her family. She's got a real world remembrance of what life was like for political dissidents in these two different regimes. Ultimately, though, she decided that it was important that she would sit down and talk with me. So I was able to get this interview. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to read the blog. It comes out on Wednesday at artemishq.com. It's the 2A blog. And we really do go into some of the issues that I've had, to be quite frank with you. One of the biggies has to do with how totalitarianism, and I use that as a broader sort of generic term for both communism and fascism, has dealt with religion. Because in order to have a totalitarian state, there has to be a belief system that it is superior to all other forms, including religious authority. So, I know that in fascist Spain, the church still continued to exist, and that's always been somewhat of a disconnect with me. In fact, it's actually been sort of a major disconnect as to why communism has taken on such a stronghold in certain places like Cuba and El Salvador and Venezuela. It would seem to me, at least on first blush, to be culturally problematic. And she had some insight to that, which I also found to be fascinating. Anyways, I definitely encourage you to read the blog. I think it's instructive, and quite frankly, I think it's important. The words that she speaks as a fellow American and understanding the place that we're at. Anyways, I want you to, of course, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe, comrades.